Part 1. The Crime. February 16, 1974. Fort Worth, Texas. Carla Walker was 17 years old. She was a junior at Western Hills High School, 4'11", honey blonde hair past her shoulders. The kind of student teachers remembered for the right reasons. Tennis club. Honor roll. The kind of girl who said hello to everyone in the hallway whether she knew them or not. That night was the Valentine's Day dance. Her sister had loaned her a light blue dress. She curled her hair. She matched her eyeshadow to the dress. Her boyfriend, Rodney McCoy, a senior football and baseball star, picked her up at her parents' house. They went to the dance. They stayed until almost everyone else had left. On the way home, they stopped at the Ridgely Bowl on Camp Bowie Boulevard to use the restroom. It was just before 2 in the morning. They never went inside. A man approached the passenger side of Rodney's car. He pulled the door open. He pointed a .22 caliber pistol at them. He grabbed Carla by the hair. Rodney fought him. The man pistol-whipped Rodney across the head until he lost consciousness. When Rodney woke up, the parking lot was empty. Carla was gone. He stumbled out of the car, bleeding from his head. He ran toward the bowling alley. He banged on the doors. The bowling alley was closed. He found a phone. He called Carla's father. Carla's father drove to the parking lot. He brought a flashlight. The first thing he saw on the asphalt was the magazine from the killer's pistol. It had fallen out during the struggle. He picked it up. He brought it home. Police would later log it as evidence, a .22 Ruger magazine, the same caliber as a gun owned by a man who lived 3 blocks from the bowling alley. 3 days passed. On February 20, 2 boys hunting near Lake Benbrook found something in a cow culvert. They ran home. Their father called the sheriff. What investigators found in that culvert is not what most people imagine when they hear the word murder. Carla had been alive for 2 days after she was taken. The autopsy report listed the injuries in clinical language. Beaten, raped, strangled, tortured. Toxicology came back positive for morphine. She had been injected. She had been kept somewhere for 48 hours. She had been alive for 48 hours after Rodney woke up bleeding in that parking lot. 48 hours where someone, somewhere in Fort Worth, knew exactly where she was. The detectives who worked that scene didn't speak to reporters about what they saw. Decades later, the ones who were still alive would still refuse to describe it. Carla Walker was buried 5 days after the dance. Her parents never recovered. Her father died first, her mother years later. Both of them went to their graves not knowing the name of the man who took their daughter. Her brother Jim was 12 years old. He would carry 46 years of silent rage before anyone gave him an answer. Part 2. The cover-up. Within 48 hours of the body being found, the Fort Worth Police Department had a list of every person in Tarrant County who had purchased a .22 Ruger pistol. It wasn't a long list. Detectives began going through it name by name. In March of 1974, 2 detectives knocked on the door of a small house 3 blocks from the Ridgely Bowl. The man who answered was 31 years old, married, 2 kids, a retired truck driver. He worked maintenance jobs around Fort Worth. Neighbors described him as quiet, polite, the kind of man who waved. His name was Glenn Samuel McCurley. He had purchased a .22 Ruger. He lived 3 blocks from where Carla was taken. The detectives asked him about the gun. He told them it had been stolen. He said it had been stolen 6 weeks earlier, out of his pickup truck while he was fishing. He said he hadn't reported the theft. He admitted he was an ex-convict. He said reporting a stolen gun would have caused him problems. The detectives asked him to come downtown. They asked him to take a polygraph. He agreed. He passed. That single result eliminated Glenn Samuel McCurley as a suspect. The detectives moved on. For decades, a rumor traveled through Fort Worth that someone in 1974 had altered the polygraph report. That the result had been changed to clear him. People who grew up in that neighborhood told that story for 50 years. The rumor was wrong. The truth is worse. The polygraph wasn't tampered with. It was a false negative. A man who had abducted a 17-year-old girl from a parking lot, who had kept her alive for 2 days, who had injected her with morphine, who had strangled her and dumped her body in a culvert, sat down and answered every question without his pulse rising. The machine cleared him. The detectives believed it. The case continued without him. In the months that followed, 2 other men confessed to killing Carla Walker. The first was Tommy Ray Nealand, a 21-year-old already on trial for 2 other murders. He volunteered the confession. He failed his polygraph. There wasn't enough evidence to charge him. The second was Jimmy Dean Sasser. 3 years later, 1977, he told police he had killed her. He was charged. He was indicted. 7 months later, he admitted he had made the entire thing up because his marriage had fallen apart. 2 false confessions. 3 years apart. Both pulled the investigation further from Glenn McCurley. There was also a letter. In 1974, Fort Worth police received an anonymous letter from someone claiming to know who killed Carla Walker. The letter was signed in ones and zeros instead of a name. It told them they were looking at the wrong man. The letter went into a file. It was never solved. Police would still be asking the public for help identifying the writer in 2019, 45 years later. By the late 1970s, the task force investigating Carla Walker's murder had been told to return to other cases. The detectives didn't forget. They just ran out of places to look. The dress Carla had borrowed from her sister was logged into evidence and sent to a property room. The bra she had worn under it, fabric samples from the culvert. Biological material was preserved on those clothes. In 1974, no technology existed to identify a man from that material. Those evidence boxes sat on a shelf in a Fort Worth police storage room. They sat there through 1980. They sat there through 1990. They sat there through 2000. They sat there through 2010. In all those years, Glenn Samuel McCurley lived less than a mile from the parking lot where he took her. He worked. He raised his children. He attended community events. He was, by every neighbor's account, a good man. A neighbor would later tell reporters she knew him as a quiet man with a good family. She had no reason to think otherwise. He had been cleared by a polygraph in 1974. Nobody in Fort Worth ever questioned that result again, for 46 years. Part 3. The Conviction. In April of 2020, an Oxygen Network television show called The DNA of Murder aired an episode about Carla Walker. The host was Paul Holes, a cold case investigator who had played a central role in identifying the Golden State Killer 2 years earlier. The Walker case had nothing to do with him professionally. He had no jurisdiction in Texas. He picked it up because the institutional failure haunted him. After the episode aired, Holes contacted Detective Jeff Bennett of the Fort Worth Police Department. He told Bennett about a private DNA lab in Texas called Othram. Othram specialized in degraded DNA. The kind of DNA that had been sitting in evidence boxes for decades. The kind of DNA traditional forensics couldn't read. Bennett wanted to send Carla's clothing to Othram. The lab work would cost $10,000. The Fort Worth Police Department did not have $10,000 to spend on a 46-year-old cold case. Oxygen paid for it. A television network, not law enforcement, funded the test that would solve the murder of Carla Walker. In June of 2020, Othram extracted a full DNA profile from material on Carla's clothing. They uploaded it to a public genealogy database called GEDmatch. In 4 weeks, the lab had a name. On July 4, 2020, Othram's founder David Middleman called Detective Bennett. He told him the DNA had been linked to a family tree. The last name was McCurley. Bennett went silent on the phone. He pulled out his case file. He looked through the original 1974 suspect list. He asked if anyone in that family tree was named Glenn Samuel McCurley. Middleman said yes. 3 days later, July 7, 2020, Fort Worth police pulled the trash bin from the curb in front of McCurley's house. They sent items to the lab. The DNA on those items matched the DNA on Carla's clothes. On September 10, 2 detectives knocked on Glenn McCurley's door. They told him the case had been reopened. They asked if he would voluntarily provide a cheek swab to eliminate himself as a suspect. He hesitated. Then he signed the form. He opened his mouth. 6 days later, the lab confirmed the match. On September 21, 2020, a U.S. Marshals Fugitive Task Force surrounded Glenn McCurley's house. He was 77 years old. He was arrested for capital murder. In the interrogation room, he denied everything. He told the detectives he had never seen Carla Walker. He had never met her. He had never harmed her. The detectives showed him the DNA evidence. He kept denying it. Then, slowly, his story began to change. He admitted he had been drinking that night. He admitted he had been at the bowling alley. He admitted he had heard a girl screaming in a car. He claimed he had walked over to help her. He admitted he had pulled her out of the vehicle. He admitted he had put her in his car. He admitted he had driven her somewhere. His final words on tape that night: "I guess I choked her to death." 11 months later, in August of 2021, Glenn McCurley went to trial. On the third day of testimony, he changed his plea to guilty. The judge sentenced him to life in prison without the possibility of parole. When Carla's sister stood up to give her victim impact statement, she looked at the 78-year-old man in the wheelchair and asked him to confess to the other young women he was suspected of killing. Investigators believed there were at least 3 more victims in Fort Worth, young women in the 1970s and 1980s, who had died at his hands. He never confessed to any of them. He died in prison in July of 2023. He was 80 years old. When Jim Walker was asked what came to mind when he heard the news of the arrest, he said one word: finally. After 46 years. Finally, the Carla Walker Act now sits before Congress. It would direct federal funding to forensic genetic genealogy testing in cold cases, so that the next family doesn't have to wait for a television network to pay the bill. But the bill cannot fix what happened in 1974. In 1974, a man sat down in a Fort Worth police station and lied with his entire body. The machine believed him. The detectives believed the machine. The case went cold for the duration of Carla Walker's lifetime if she had lived. She would have been 63 years old when Othram extracted his DNA. She would have been 64 when he was arrested. She would have been 66 when he changed his plea. She didn't get any of those years. He got all of them. He got a wife, 2 children, a house 3 blocks from the place he abducted her, a reputation as a good neighbor, 46 years of Sundays. Carla Walker got 17 years. The dress, the dance, the boy waiting in the car, that was all of it. Finally solved.